Welcome to Think Tank, the podcast. I'm Steve Adubato. I'm joined here in the East Main Media Studio with Nicole Swennerton, our longtime producer of, actually not so long time, she's one of the newer producers, but she's the senior producer of Think Tank, the broadcast, and Mary Gamba, who's been with us for a while as a leader on our team. Let folks know how they can check out previous podcasts. You're supposed to do it. So Nicole, you ready to tell everyone?
Sure.
Go.
To hear more Think Tank podcasts, you can subscribe on Apple Podcasts or Google Play, or you can visit our website at steveadubato.org. That's ADUBATO. And you can also follow us on Twitter at Steve Adubato and on Facebook at Steve Adubato PhD to check out all of our content.
So this is an audio program, so you can't see all the credits. I just want to thank Lauren Gary, who's the senior producer of Think Tank, the podcast, who makes all of this happen. So we are in media. We are not a national program on PBS, Fios, and other platforms, but we look at national issues. We look at trends. We look at culture. We look at things that matter in our lives, and one of the things that matters to us is media. So our thing is to bring together media leaders who write about, think about, talk about, and do media. So we bring together in this Think Tank, the podcast, Neal Shapiro, who is our friend and colleague, the president and chief executive officer of WNET, that's the PBS flagship station in the United States. They also created and own, if you will, NJTV, the public television station in New Jersey, and WLIW out on the island, Long Island. They operate WLIW as well. And also in this program, you'll be hearing from Joe Strupp. Joe is a fascinating guy, and Joe has been a journalist and author for a long time and just put out a compelling book called Killing Journalism, How Greed, Laziness, and Donald Trump are destroying news and how we can save it. So here's the thing. I am old school and obviously old, and I read newspapers every day, multiple newspapers. Mary, where do you get your information?
I get my information online. I use newspapers. I line the bottom of our birdcage in our house, so that's where they go.
That's not helping their podcast, but go ahead.
Hey, we have to keep it light too, right? I get all of my news from Twitter. Every ounce of it. I follow all of those same papers that you read. I follow the news on Twitter.
Online, you mean?
Online. Well, on my phone, on Twitter.
But you get news on Twitter? That's not news.
It is, because all of those stories that you're seeing, whether in any of the papers that you're reading, are there. They're clickable, and then they also are supported by video, shorter sound bites. I have a hard time. I'll read a headline, I'll read the first paragraph, and then I'm bored.
Mary, I'm reading a story in the New York Times, and the next thing I see is the president tweeting saying fake news. So he says fake news.
Right.
Someone has a comprehensive story in the Times, Washington Post, Star Ledger, anywhere. Now, Nicole, the question is the president tweet that says fake news tell us don't read that because it's not true?
Unfortunately, he is trying to tell people not to read substantive news stories.
Well,
by
how do you
saying
get
that.
through all this? How do you gather information and figure out for yourself what you think is quote unquote true?
I also use Twitter to get my news and other podcasts as well. Those are my main sources of news. But I think learning the reputable news sources is the most important thing to figure out for yourself, and trusting in what you think is right. You know, when someone's telling you that's not true, that's fake, and you know that a reputable news source is correct, you know, you have to hold to your beliefs.
So it's so interesting. As we do this program, the president, and then we'll date ourselves, put out a series of tweets saying that 4 members of the United States Congress, all who happen to be women and women of color, he told them, if you don't like our country, you should, quote, go back where you came from, and fixed it. Except 3 of them were born in the United States. Another one was a naturalized American citizen. And he wrote fake news. The news organizations put out the tweet and asked, is it racist? Many of us think it is. He said fake news. I'm sorry, if the media puts out what you said, how is that fake? I'm perplexed by this. And how do we decipher all that, Mary?
I think the most important thing, and Nicole said it as well, is get the information and then make very smart choices. Do a little bit more digging. And again, I know you said you like papers. If you get that same information from Twitter, you could then...
Online as well.
And online. You could dig deeper and learn more. Be educated. Don't just take anything at surface level.
Don't believe my lying eyes.
Oh, wow. You were really dating yourself right about now.
No, I'm serious. President said, don't believe what you see.
No, I know.
In the news, don't believe what you see. They my lying eyes or my eyes that tell me what I see.
Right. No, and I get it. And I think that the main point, what I'm trying to get across is, and I try to teach people who just literally see the headline and they say, this is it, they believe it, it's gospel. Do your research and become educated, regardless of where you're getting your news.
Except here's the only thing, as we listen to Joe Strupp, who wrote this compelling book, and Neal Shapiro, one of the leaders in the PBS movement in this country, if we only look at information and news sources that tell us that we are right and reinforce what we believe, Nicole, how the heck are we going to get contrary views and then come to a thoughtful, critically examined decision?
That's a great question, and it's really hard. People want to listen to people telling them, yes, you're right.
You're right.
Of course, but there are news sources out there. There are TV networks that are nonpartisan, and that's what we need to pay attention to.
That would be us on public broadcasting.
Of course, that's PBS. That's what people need to be paying attention to.
We don't have a point of view.
Exactly. And Think Tank, where the podcast stemmed from,
Think Tank, the TV show that Nicole produces,
the series, was created for just that. Bring together educated individuals who can talk about their views, but of course, then we leave it open for others' interpretation.
We don't have a view. That's why others come on, express their views. We can challenge them. We challenge everyone respectfully, but we always have a civil conversation. That's exactly what you're going to hear in Think Tank, the podcast, with Neal Shapiro, the head of WNET and PBS, and also Joe Strupp, author of a compelling book on where the heck the news is going and what we need to do about it. Think Tank, the podcast. This is Steve Adubato. Check it out. Hi, I'm Steve Adubato. Welcome to the Tisch WNET studio here in the heart of New York City. It is our honor and pleasure once again to welcome Neal Shapiro, our president and CEO of WNET. Good to see you, my friend.
Nice to be back, Steve.
Last time we were here, last year, we were talking about where we are in media and journalism. I'm going to jump right in. Mm-hmm. Where are we?
We're in a tough time and an exciting time. We're in a tough time because criticism from the White House and some of the conservative wing has never been tougher, more misplaced. And I think more building suspicion about everything. We're in an exciting place because there are more partnerships, technology is better, and I think people are starting to realize the value of journalism, that it's unbiased and straight ahead. And you're seeing some of that and more support for institutions like PBS and like 13 and like NJTV than we've seen before.
Yeah. I ask you this, and I don't want to, and you want to see past interviews with Neal, go on our website right now. The fundraising part, the economics of what we do, is that more challenging than ever? Forget about the government side, because they're going to do what they're going to do in Washington. Fundraising for you and your colleagues, more challenging?
Yeah, it is more challenging because let's start out, we give away a product for free. That's a tough economic basis to start with. And news is always a harder thing to raise money for than some of the other things. Not that we're not proud of all of it for arts and culture and history and science and so forth. News is a tougher thing. It's interesting, people are happy to partake of it, people are happy to see the value of it, but it's hard to get them to realize how much we depend on it. And especially now, the interesting thing in news is you have to be not just on how we're watching now on television, you have to be on every platform, you have to think about digital. All those come with extra cost.
Yeah, Metro Focus, by the way, log on to the Metro Focus, the WNET website or the NJTV one or WLIW, about Metro Focus. I remember you started talking about Metro Focus. I'm going to see if I can get this right. Was it 5 or 6 years ago?
Yeah.
Okay. Describe what you thought it would be, what it is today, and then we'll talk about all the other platforms it's on. Go ahead. Loaded question, I know.
What I want it to be, we were on just first once a month. And I said, we need a bigger blueprint because because news in the tri-state area is so important and so challenging. And with all due respect to our commercial competitors, they can't really take deep dives into what they need to, right? They have 22 minutes, they have to do traffic and sports and weather. But the things that I thought were important to the city, things like education, zoning, transportation, right?
Falling infrastructure, crumbling around us. That's not going to happen unless there's a horrific incident.
That's right.
And the local, it's not right?
That's right. And it's also just by nature of their format. They have commercials to squeeze in, so they're not going to take 10 minutes, 15 minutes, a half an hour to take deep dives, and I thought we should do that. So it went from a monthly show to a weekly show, and then a couple years ago 5 years ago to a daily show. And that's where we are now.
And by the way, congratulations to the team at Metro Focus. Just won New York Emmy.
First local Emmy.
Right?
Very excited.
It's a big deal.
It's a big deal.
To Dave and the team and everyone there, to Raf and all the folks there. So try this one. Firing line, we had Margaret Hoover here. Mm-hmm. And also we had John Avalon taping today from CNN, who is Margaret's husband, and he's a huge fan of public broadcasting. When you and your colleagues said, let's bring Firing Line, the old William F. Buckley program back, what was the thinking behind it, and why now more than ever as we lead into 2020?
Interesting story about that, because Margaret is clearly a big talent, right? And her executive producer and I had known each other years ago at ABC News. He came in, we talked about the need for making sure that we had all points of view reflected. And in this era where people are screaming and shouting.
And not listening to
And
each
not
other.
listening. Margaret is really smart. She comes at it from more sort of a moderate to conservative point of view.
Sure does.
But in a very open and honest way. And her interviews are probing but very respectful, all about the kind of dialogue we need in public television. We need everywhere, but the only place that's going to have it is public television. So Firing Line was that place for years and years, and then it went away as Mr. Buckley went away. So when she came back and said, I'd like to do this show, and, you know, by the way, I'm in the lineage of Herbert Hoover, and by the way, we have the rights to Firing Line, and I think we'll call it the Margaret Hoover Show. And I said, I got a better idea. Why don't we call it Firing Line? He said, oh, you think so?
You did that?
Yeah. Only because I thought Firing Line had this, you know, incredible resonance with the audience, and it does.
Well, I'll bring it back to the local level. I called Neal several months ago because we have to check in, and I said, Neal, we have an idea. Ben Wattenberg did a program called Think Tank many years ago, and we lost Ben Wattenberg, a conservative-leaning intellectual.
Yeah, exactly.
Is that what you say? And I said, what about if we create a series called Think Tank? We did it we tape it over at NJTV on the Jersey side in Newark, and just have a meaningful discussion with different people, civil, respectful. And you said, basically, if you can raise the money, and we can do it right.
Yeah.
Why is that civil discourse, disagreeing but never being disagreeable and personal and negative, why is it so important to our public broadcasting brand?
You know, I think it's important because it's not that other people don't discuss issues. They just yell and scream at each other, right? And some, I think, oftentimes it's just about the theater. It's either about getting people who will disagree about each other and amping up the atmosphere because people respond to tension, but they don't learn anything. Or the other thing which happens a lot is getting people who agree with each other all the time. So you get the same point of view over and over again. And that just reinforces people's point of view. What I think public television has carved out is truly a unique place where people from different points of view, as you say, will disagree agreeably. And that seems to me gives the audience a chance that they get really very few other places on television, maybe no other place on television, where to sit back and say, I won't be distracted by who dislikes each other more. I'm going to pay attention to what they're saying, to the substance of it. And that's what makes us unique. And in these times where the temperature is so amped up on everything, where people even in the same family can't talk because
talk.
Right, because the fuse, it takes one word to set off an argument. That's what I think makes public television truly unique.
Go back to the Jersey side. By the way, when we mentioned NJTV, there would be no NJTV if there were not for WNET and Neal believing in that idea, not just believing it, but helping making it happen. Is it 2011?
Yeah.
8 years.
Yeah.
Talk about NJTV today, NJTV, the network, the news, and also the partnership with folks like Spotlight.
First, I couldn't be prouder of what NJTV has done over 8 years. As you talked about in the very beginning, they sort of flipped a switch and said, now it's yours. And
the government got out of the business and said, anyone want it? No one did.
Right. So we stepped in, but it was truly, you know, we had a little studio. We sort of ran together the newscast, heroic, but truly understaffed. Now we have a daily newscast. It's the only one that covers the whole state. They do a great job. What I'm very excited about is, in the spirit of how do we do better, is we've acquired NJ Spotlight, which is the leading digital news provider in the state. And now, for the first time, a statewide public television station, we're working with a statewide digital news service to together produce something which will be more exciting. And I think we will borrow from each other. I think what makes NJ Spotlight great is they have incredible depth. They have people who know these issues backwards and forwards. And they're very good at the print word, but they're not so good, as they'll acknowledge, in what video is. And we have great video reporters who are, you know, constrained by a minute and a half or 2 minutes or 3 minutes every night. So to put those two things together and make it a richer experience for both is very exciting.
So, real quick follow-up on the Neal. You moderated a forum at NJPAC, New Jersey Performing Arts Center, on the importance of, I don't know if I want to call it local journalism. What's the difference between that and hyper-local journalism? Is there a difference?
Yeah. So local journalism would be, you know, what's important to you, written maybe by the city or the state. Hyper-journalism would say, like, what's important to you in your neighborhood, in your community. And the challenge for journalists is going to be not just how do I cover things that make a difference in the country or the state or even the city, but what are truly local things I can get. And what's exciting about the digital world is we can tailor that news. And the more we know about you, so for instance, we've been talking about Spotlight taking advantage of all these databases that they have access to. So if you care about, and especially in New Jersey, you care about property taxes or school enrollment or crime or transportation, we can report about those things across the state or across north versus south or central. But what you really want to do, if you have the time, and we can teach you how to do it, is find out what does it mean in your school district? What does it mean where you live? And the ability to do that and then do stories out of that is the next big step in journalism.
Before I let you out of here, your constant, I mean, I always say the same thing about you. a producer at heart, but is an executive in his role. Both, put them together. How do you stay as fresh as you continue to be in terms of not doing the same job, innovating all the time? Some say innovate or die.
Look, I think every corporation has to do that. I consider myself incredibly lucky. I get to work with great people. We have great partners. I think they also bring a sense of energy. You know, you can't innovate if you don't have people who are willing to try things. You can't innovate if the team isn't open to that. And I think our team, both the partners we work with like you and the people who work directly for us, all are excited about that. And there's something great about coming to work and saying, this was good, how do we make it better? And that's truly what we have.
And to Neal's point, not just because he's the boss here, it's because it's a fact. We wouldn't be here in this studio doing this program, with this program, if we're not for this partnership. Thank you, my friend.
My pleasure.
Well, I always say this every time. We'll talk about the Yankees another time. We're just fans. And the rest of you are too. This is One-on-One. We're at the Tisch WNET studio here in the heart of Lincoln Center. We're right back after this. There he is, Joe Strupp, journalist, author of a compelling book called Killing Journalism: How Greed, Laziness, and Donald Trump are destroying news, and how we can save it. Good to see you, Joe.
Thanks for having me. Good to see you always.
Let's jump right into this. What the heck does Donald Trump and what he has said about the media have to do with the fact that we, many of us in the media, particularly on the print side, are struggling financially?
I think he adds to the issue because, as most of the book deals with, the media is having problems financially. It's having problems with oversight. There are fewer people doing news. There are more big corporations and big guns making money off of news. The cable channels are taking it easy. They want to get the talking heads. They want to get the panels. They want to get the angry. And everything's breaking news now, even if it isn't. And you know, you've been in news longer than most of them. What's really not being covered is the important issues and the full in-depth issues. Trump comes in, he attacks the press, claims
enemy of the people.
Right, we're enemies of the people, we're fake news. It's just not true.
Fake news. When people just repeat fake news about something that they think is fake or that they don't like, what's the problem with that?
A lot of it plays into the internet. The internet now puts everything on an equal scale. The New York Times, NYTimes.com, CNN.com, NJTV.com is on the same level with, you name the site.
And you're saying you don't think a significant number of people differentiate between, at NJTV and in our production company, we collaborate with NJTV.
Sure.
We vet this stuff. We have to back this stuff up.
And so do real news outlets, but people can put up things like InfoWars or WorldNet Daily or fake
hold on, you think people thought Alex Jones was...
whatever it might be, and they believe it.
You think people thought Alex Jones was for real?
Sure, they still do. He has plenty of followers. You know that. A lot of people think Trump is for real in many things
he's for real because he's the president.
That aren't true, right? But even before he was president, he still had false things. He had the birther idea. He had the wanted to see
President Obama said he wasn't
Trump's
born in
birth
this country.
certificate. Wanted to see a lot of things that weren't true. Made claims about Muslims cheering on 9/11 in New Jersey that, of course, never happened. The proof's out there that it isn't real, and it isn't just Trump. It's a lot of people on the right and some on the left, but mostly on the rightish, or just lazy journalism that gets clicks, gets eyeballs, gets easy ratings. That's what sells. That's all that really counts because there's such competition, such a demand for the splintered audience, and so many outlets now. When we were kids, how many news outlets were there? How many newspapers
podcasts?
were
You
there?
have a couple podcasts.
Yes, I have podcasts, The Retro Room and Joe's Media Corner. And I also have my website that is thestruppblog.net. And I'm also working at Asbury Park Press these days as well, app.com. Have to get all the plugs in.
I hear you.
But there's a lot of sites that have equal footing.
Isn't it better that all these different platforms we can get information? Isn't that better for us as information consumers?
It is. I think I call the internet a necessary evil because we need all that access. We have places where newspapers that used to have to wait a day to get news out can get it out as instantaneously as anyone else. That's a good thing. It's also great for research. You can read every newspaper in the world online right now.
Yeah.
Years ago, you couldn't. You had to go just to get the Boston Globe or the Washington Post. You had to wait a few days. But you also open the access to anyone who wants to put a website up, write whatever they want. People believe it because it's on the same level
What's the
as
impact?
a news outlet that is credible.
Joe, what's the impact?
I think the impact is people have to start trusting news that they're looking for news that they can trust and doing their own background, doing their own research. Don't just believe something because someone tweeted it out and you go to the link, or because your friend sent it to you, or because you went on a website that looks credible because it's well made.
And it reinforces something I already thought I believed.
That's the other
So it must
problem.
be good.
It's splintered on both left and right. People are just watching Fox. They're just watching MSNBC. They're just reading newspaper or magazine XYZ. They have to open up, but you have to do the research to find out what's credible online now, because there are so many things that can be online, not be credible, and no one cares. They're making money. The web is open. It's very difficult to shut down a website that gets things wrong.
Joe, newspaper's dead?
No.
We're talking with Joe Strupp, who's the author of Killing Journalism. Good stuff.
I don't think newspapers are dead. I think they're transitioned to other forms, websites, video. We do a lot of video where I am. The New York Times, a lot of sites do different video.
But the print is like, I'm old school, 4 or 5 papers every day. I read those papers. I mark them up. Staff looked at me the other day. I came in with a bunch of articles marked up. Really? We could have seen these online.
Yeah.
I don't know, like marking them up.
The print is diminishing. You'll have a day when there's no or very few print papers.
That's happening.
It is. But most people younger than us are looking on their phones, are looking on their iPads, looking on their computers. That opens it up to a lot of different people getting different kinds of things. New York Times could never run video or audio 30 years ago. Now they can.
How's it any different with Donald Trump? You're saying Donald Trump talking about fake news and the media is the enemy of the people. How's it any different than what Richard Nixon did in the early 1970s when he basically argued that the media was the enemy as well?
That's a very good point, and I go into that in the book, the whole history of that, how it goes back to Nixon and even before Nixon. It's because he does have Twitter. He has a very unfiltered area he can get on. He's also dealing with cable news and the internet, which is constant. They're constantly watching him all day, broadcasting what he does. He can choose things he puts out.
What do you think of,
and he's much harsher.
What do you think about President Trump and Fox News together? I know those folks well, and we have some friends over there, but my question is, what do you think about that connection?
I think he definitely gets a lot of what he gets from Fox News. And a lot of it is the worst part of Fox. It's the Fox and Friends. It's the misinformation. There are good people at Fox, Brett Baer, Shep Smith. They do a very good job. Chris Wallace. They do good work. And they've taken him on. Megyn Kelly took him on when she was there.
Did.
I think it's dangerous on both ways, that it's a conflict. And he gets a lot of information.
But isn't it also dangerous for
true.
MSNBC and CNN and some others who do Trump, nothing but Trump all the time?
Yes.
And most of it's having people on, even though they have others, who basically bash the guy constantly.
It is too much because there are other forms of news that are not being, there's other stories not being told. You can't watch MSNBC now without having Trump constantly.
I know what I'm going to get.
And there's other news, there's other stories. Oh, the only thing you get without Trump is if there's a big shooting or some big breaking story. Otherwise, people come on, the latest anti-Trump thing, which should be covered, but is it the only story all day? No.
It's degree. Before I let you out of here, we created this new series called Think Tank, which I told you about.
Yes, excellent.
Policy, issue-oriented. Does it have a chance in the world that you just described?
I think people have to make it have a chance. I think those who are producing have to give people a reason to watch and listen and learn. And I think the public has to go looking for valued news now. There's so much news that isn't valued, that's not credible, that's lying to you, that's boring, that you do have to check the facts and check who is organizing the news you're seeing and not believe everything you see, because there's more of a chance now for news that isn't credible to get out there because of the internet.
Before I let you out, are you optimistic about this thing going in the right direction, moving in the right direction?
I'm skeptical, but I haven't given up completely, because part of my book also looks at a lot of the answers, one of them being nonprofit news. And again, people educating themselves. There's a lot of fact-checking out there. There's a lot of websites that divide the lies from the truth, and I trust people for doing that.
Sorry for interrupting. The folks at Spotlight partner here with
Yes, it's another great
NJTV.
nonprofit outlet.
Great stuff.
Yes.
Joe Strupp is the author of Killing Journalism, How Greed, Laziness, and Donald Trump Are Destroying News and How We Can Save It. Get this book. It's important. And by the way, Jim Lehrer, PBS NewsHour, says it's terrific and it's important.
Yeah, Jim did
And by the
nice
way, you
things.
love PBS. I know that.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, sir.
Well done. This is Steve Adubato. That's Joe. We'll be right back after this.
One-on-One with Steve Adubato has been a production of the Caucus Educational Corporation, celebrating over 30 years of broadcast excellence. Funding for this edition of One-on-One with Steve Adubato has been provided by Atlantic Health System, Johnson & Johnson, NJ Best, New Jersey's 529 College Savings Plan, Suez, Georgian Court University, the law firm of Gibbons, P.C., and by Keystone Mountain Lakes Regional Council of Carpenters. Promotional support provided by bestofnj.com and by the New Jersey Business and Industry Association. Transportation provided by Airbrook Limousine, serving the metropolitan New York, New Jersey area.